There comes a strange and disorienting moment after the spiritual awakening. The fire burns through illusion, the veil lifts, and suddenly, the world looks different. But more unsettling than the shift in how you see the world is the shift in how you feel about it. That burning drive you once had, the desire to climb, to achieve, to impress, to conquer it vanishes. What once stirred your ambition now leaves you cold. You look at your goals and wonder, why did I even want this? What once seemed so urgent, so worth chasing, now seems hollow, even absurd. And this is when the fear creeps in. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like I've lost all motivation? But this is not a collapse. It is a shedding. You are not breaking down. You are breaking free. You see, before awakening, most of what we pursue in life does not arise from our soul, but from the ego. The ego builds its entire architecture on external identities, how we're seen, what we own, where we stand in the hierarchy of society, and so it creates motivation by stirring up fear and desire. It says, if you don't accomplish this, you are a failure. It says, if you can just achieve this, they will love you. And for a while that works. We move, we grind, we chase. Not because it fulfills us, but because we are terrified of what it would mean to stop. Because in stillness, we might have to face ourselves, so we remain in motion, not out of purpose, but out of panic. Then the awakening comes, and with it, a subtle but irreversible shift. The old fears don't control you the same way. The need to be liked, admired, approved of. It begins to dissolve, and with it, so does the fuel that powered your old life. The ego begins to lose its grip, and when it does, so too does the motivation it once produced. But here's the great misunderstanding. Many mistake this for failure, for laziness, for depression. But what you're experiencing is the withdrawal from egoic ambition. You're not unmotivated. You are no longer willing to move from illusion. The reason you no longer feel drawn to your old dreams is because they were never truly yours. They were borrowed, constructed from the fears of your parents, the pressures of your culture, the wounds of your past. They were stories written by someone else's hand. You simply memorized the script and played the part. But awakening burns the script. And so, here you are offstage, costume removed, standing in silence. You feel empty not because you have nothing left, but because you have released what was never meant to stay. This emptiness is not a void. It is a clearing. And the reason you can't yet fill it with new purpose is because the old architecture of desire is still falling apart. It must, because true purpose cannot be built on a foundation of fear. And so, for a time, you will be asked to stand in the in-between, no longer driven by the old, not yet moved by the new. It feels like stillness. But something deeper is happening. A deeper voice is beginning to emerge. Soft, subtle, ancient, not the voice of the world, but the voice of your soul. It does not shout. It does not threaten. It waits. It waits until the noise within you is quiet enough to hear it. And only then does real motivation return. Not as a rush, not as a frenzy, but as a quiet certainty. A pull, not a push. A knowing, not approving. But to hear that voice, you must be willing to let the old motivation die, and that is terrifying, because for so long you believed your worth was tied to your productivity. For so long you believed that motion meant meaning. And so when the engine stalls, you panic. But the stalling is sacred. It is the sacred pause between who you were and who you are becoming. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not lazy. You are not lost. You are awakening, and awakening takes time. It takes courage. It takes the willingness to feel disoriented, to sit in the space where the old goals no longer fit and the new ones have not yet arrived. If you feel like you have no motivation right now, know this: your soul is clearing the false so that only the true remains. What will emerge from this process is not the frantic hunger of the ego, but the steady fire of purpose. You won't need to push yourself anymore, because the thing that calls you will be so deeply aligned that it draws you without force. But until that calling arrives, rest, not in defeat, but in reverence. Rest as one who is no longer willing to trade their truth for applause. Rest as one who is waiting for the voice that only speaks in silence. And when it comes, you will know. This time, you are not chasing a dream to be worthy. You are answering a calling because you already are. There is a point in the journey, after the awakening, after the breakdown of illusions, when you begin to feel like a ghost in your own life. The things you once held on to no longer comfort you. The people you used to laugh with now feel far away, even when they're right beside you. Your thoughts feel quieter, but also more confusing. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. You are somewhere in between, and in that space, it's easy to feel lost, aimless, unmotivated, as though life is paused and no one told you why. But this strange and heavy stillness is not the end. It is the middle. You have stepped out of the identity you wore for years, maybe your whole life. That mask that once felt like skin, now peeled away, has left behind rawness. The roles you used to play, leaser, achiever, fixer, chaser, survivor, have all collapsed. You don't know how to function inside them anymore, but you haven't yet found what comes next. That space between the old self and the true self is not nothing. It is everything. It is the void, the sacred threshold between illusion and authenticity. And it's in this space that motivation seems to die. But it's not that you've lost all desire. It's that the old motivations no longer belong to you. You don't want to climb ladders that lean against walls you no longer believe in. You don't want to chase applause that sounds hollow. You don't want to pursue goals that were never yours to begin with. The momentum that once carried you forward has vanished, and for the first time, you're standing still without direction, wondering if you're broken or worse, done. But the truth is, you are not done. You are being reformed. The void is not a place of punishment. It is the passage. It is the dark womb in which the true self is slowly, silently taking shape. But the mind, accustomed to movement and certainty, resists this phase. It panics in stillness. It interprets silence as failure. So it whispers, get up, go back, do something. But what it really means is, return to who you were. And something deep inside you refuses. Not because you're weak, but because you can no longer betray yourself. Even if you don't yet know who the new self is, you know who it is not. This in-between state can feel unbearable, because you can't explain it to anyone. You're no longer who they knew you to be, but you don't have new words to define yourself either, so they look at you and see apathy, but what they're really witnessing is transformation, a becoming that doesn't move in straight lines or meet societal timelines. You may not have external proof of progress, but your inner world is being rewired. The mind, the body, the soul. They are learning to move in a new rhythm, one not dictated by fear or performance, but by truth. And that takes time. The confusion you feel isn't a lack of clarity, it's the collapse of a false map. You are no longer being guided by ego-driven metrics, you are waiting for something real to emerge. But real things are quiet at first. They rise not in thunder, but in whispers, and to hear them, you must let the noise of the old world fade. That is what the void is for, not to trap you, but to attune you. To bring you into deeper listening, deeper presence, deeper alignment, and that is why motivation seems absent. Because what once motivated you, validation, fear of failure, desire for acceptance, is no longer powerful enough to move you. The new motivation, the one rooted in soul, is still gathering itself. It has not yet risen to the surface, but it is coming, slowly, organically, authentically, and when it does, it won't push you. it will draw you. So in this space between what was and what will be, let yourself rest. Let yourself grieve the version of you that could no longer survive the truth. Let yourself be empty without rushing to fill it. Let yourself feel the quiet ache of transformation without trying to numb it or label it. You are not in limbo, you are in gestation, and what is being born through you is not a better version of your old self, but a completely different being. One who moves with purpose, not pressure. One who chooses presence over performance. One who no longer compromises to feel safe. You are not unmotivated. You are in the sacred pause before the soul speaks. And when it does, you will rise, but not in the old way, not to chase, not to impress. You will rise because something inside you knows it is time, not because the world demands it, but because your truth can no longer be quiet. And that kind of rising, rooted in the real, is more powerful than anything you've ever known. Let the silence shape you. Let the in-between carry you. The true self is not far. It is forming. You may not recognize it at first, but after a spiritual awakening, your body begins to speak in ways your mind can't always interpret. You think you're just tired, unmotivated, or emotionally distant. But beneath those sensations is a profound physiological shift. Your nervous system, once wired for survival and high alert, is finally being asked to slow down, and for the first time in your life, it doesn't know what to do with the silence. Before the awakening, many people live in a constant state of fight or flight. You run toward deadlines, you chase approval, you overextend, you push yourself far beyond what your body wants. And because that state of stress has become normal, you don't even notice it. You think being exhausted is just the cost of being productive. You think rest must be earned. You think stillness is laziness. And so, you move through life fueled not by inspiration, but by adrenaline. The nervous system hums in the background, always alert, always braced, because somewhere along the way, your sense of safety was tied to motion. Stopping felt like dying, but spiritual awakening is the death of that illusion. It's the beginning of the unraveling, and not just mentally, not just emotionally, but somatically. It reaches into your body and begins to undo the patterns of tension and urgency that were wired into your very being. And that is when everything slows down. That is when fatigue creeps in. That is when you no longer feel capable of pushing. And that is when you think something is wrong with you. But this isn't collapse. It's repair. When your nervous system begins to downshift, what you experience as loss of motivation is often the body finally catching up to what the soul already knows. You can't keep living the way you did. You can't keep sacrificing your peace for performance. You can't keep sprinting towards some undefined finish line. The burnout, the fatigue, the numbness. It isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's your body saying, I can't do this anymore. And instead of judging that stillness, it must be honored. Because only when you allow the body to rest can it begin to release the patterns that kept it locked in survival. It's strange at first, this return to slowness, because the world around you is still running. People still expect you to smile, to produce, to perform. They don't understand why you're not who you used to be. They call it burnout, they call it depression, but what they don't see is that this is a rite of passage. It is a sacred healing. You are never meant to live in constant fight or flight. You are never meant to measure your worth by your output. But the culture told you that productivity was identity, and you believed it, because that's what we're all taught. And so your body adapted, it hardened, it braced, it disconnected. It became a machine that could endure anything except stillness. But your soul remembered something else, something softer, something slower, something truer. And when awakening arrived, it wasn't just your mind that began to shift. It was every cell in your body, This healing doesn't come with bright lights and fireworks. It comes in the quiet. It comes when you wake up and feel no urge to do anything. It comes in the afternoons when all you can do is sit in silence. It comes when even the things you used to love require more energy than you can give. And in those moments, the temptation will be to shame yourself, to call yourself lazy, to wish you could go back. But you must resist that temptation. You must learn to trust what is unfolding. Because in that stillness, your nervous system is rewiring itself. The energy you once used to survive is being rerouted toward healing, toward integration, toward authenticity. You're no longer running from yourself. You're learning how to be with yourself, and that requires a different kind of strength. One the world won't recognize, but you will. You will feel it in the way your breath begins to deepen, in the way your chest begins to soften, in the way your choices begin to align, not with what looks good, but with what feels true. You will not feel driven in this stage because drive was once a trauma response, but something deeper than drive will begin to emerge, not a push, but a pull, not urgency, but clarity, a knowing that doesn't scream but simply is. And when that new energy comes, it won't feel like a high. It will feel like peace. And it will come only after you have allowed the system to recalibrate, to come back into its natural rhythm. This is the stage no one talks about, the part where you lose all your fuel because the engine you've been running on is no longer compatible with your soul. But you must trust that the stillness is sacred. You are not lazy, you are not unmotivated, you are in the process of becoming whole, and that process cannot be rushed. So when you feel the heaviness, when you feel the fog, when you feel the emptiness, remember, this is not the end. This is the healing, and real healing always begins in the nervous system. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a spiritual awakening. It's not the peace-filled silence that people expect, but a strange and hollow quiet, a loss of connection to the things that once stirred you. You look around at the world and feel like you no longer belong to it. The job that once excited you now feels like a burden. The conversations that used to energize you seem empty. The goals you once chased feel like shadows of someone else's dream. And in this emptiness, you wonder, where did my passion go? But it wasn't passion that disappeared. It was the illusion that fueled it. Before awakening, much of what we call motivation is actually compensation. We strive not from truth, but from lack. We hustle for validation, achievement, attention, because something deep inside us believes we are not enough unless we prove it. So we burn ourselves out in the name of ambition. We chase status in the name of success. We confuse urgency with purpose, and pressure with passion, and then awakening comes, and it strips all of it away. What you are experiencing is not the death of passion, but the unraveling of false desire. The old passion came from the ego, and the ego is collapsing. What once ignited you now repels you, because it was never rooted in your soul. It was rooted in who you thought you had to be. That's why it feels like the world has turned gray. That's why nothing seems to move you. You are not depressed. You are detoxing. You are withdrawing from the addiction to performance. You are separating from the identity you used to wear like a costume. And of course that process feels empty. Of course it feels numb. Because until now, your inner fire burned from borrowed fuel, and now that it's gone, your system is recalibrating, searching for a new source, a deeper flame, one that does not require external ignition. That flame cannot be forced. It cannot be summoned by guilt or by pressure. It reveals itself only when you have fully surrendered the need to be someone, only when you have allowed the emptiness to stretch across your days without panic, only when you have accepted that you do not know who you are becoming, but that you are becoming nonetheless, and it is here, in this space of detachment, that a new passion is born, not loud, not manic, not desperate, but quiet, steady, patient. It begins not with a goal, but with a feeling, a resonance. Something soft inside you leans toward something else, not for recognition, not for success, but for truth, for alignment, and you begin to realize that real passion is not something you chase. It's something that calls you when you're finally quiet enough to listen. The world will not understand this phase. It will try to convince you that you've lost your way. It will measure you against your past and find you lacking. It will tell you to return to the fire that once consumed you, but you know too much now. You've seen what's behind the curtain. You've felt the hollowness of performance. You cannot go back. This loss of motivation is not a mistake. It is a message. Your inner compass is being repaired. Your desires are being refined. You are learning the difference between activity and authenticity, between reaction and creation, and in this stillness, your true essence begins to surface, not the version of you that was shaped by trauma or by society, but the one that was buried beneath all the noise. And that essence, when it begins to move, will not rush, it will not roar, it will not clamor for attention, it will flow like water, it will pull you in subtle directions, it will whisper, "Here, try this," and slowly, gently, you will begin to follow. Not because you have to, not because it proves anything, but because it feels true. This is not the end of your passion. It is the beginning of your authenticity, the beginning of a life that moves from inner knowing instead of external striving, the beginning of a path that does not require you to abandon yourself in order to succeed. The passion you are looking for isn't gone. It is simply waiting for you to stop looking in all the old places. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not lost. You are simply remembering who you are without the noise, and that remembering requires space. It requires slowness. It requires the courage to let go of what no longer resonates, even when nothing new has yet arrived. Let the silence stay a little longer. Let the old passions fall away. What's coming will not feel like fire. It will feel like truth. One of the most unsettling parts of spiritual awakening is the realization that your old goals no longer fit the shape of your new self. You look at the plans you once pursued so fiercely, and they no longer feel like they belong to you. What once felt urgent, necessary, and deeply personal now feels foreign, empty, and disconnected. You ask yourself, what am I even working toward? And in that question is the seed of something far more powerful than ambition. It is the beginning of deep alignment. This stage is not about laziness or failure. It is not about giving up or losing your way. It is about waking up from a life that was programmed for you, not by you. You are beginning to see that so many of your past pursuits were inherited. You chased the job because that's what you were told success looked like. You sought the relationship because you feared loneliness more than misalignment. You built a life based on shoulds and expectations, and now that you've awakened, none of it feels real anymore. It is disorienting. You may even grieve the version of you that had such clear direction, even if it was false. But grief is not regression. It is clarity. This is where a great internal silence begins to open, a vast space where the noise of the world fades and the voice of the soul begins to stir. But it does not speak in demands or deadlines. It whispers, it nudges, it doesn't tell you what to do, it asks you to feel, and that is where the resistance begins, because for so long you've been taught to ignore your inner signals. You were taught to keep going, to push through, to do what makes sense on paper. But now, none of it makes sense anymore. The logic that built your old life does not apply to the one you're entering. You must understand that this disillusionment is not a mistake. It is the necessary breakdown of the old paradigm. A system is being dismantled inside you. The parts that used to operate out of fear, pressure, and conditioning are no longer in control. They are losing their grip, and with their fall comes a sense of aimlessness. not because there is no direction, but because the new direction cannot be forced. It must be revealed. To the outside world, it may look like you've lost your drive. People may question your choices. They may ask why you've slowed down, why you're not doing more. But what they don't see is that you are not interested in more anymore. You're interested in true. You're interested in building something from the ground up, not from the blueprints handed to you by others, but from the architecture of your own soul. That takes time, that takes patience, and most of all, that takes the willingness to let go of certainty. Because this journey doesn't come with guarantees. You may not have a 5-year plan. You may not have a title to chase. You may not even know what's next. But in this sacred space of not knowing, something pure is forming. You are beginning to trust life from within. You are beginning to listen to what actually feels aligned, rather than what looks impressive. And yes, there will be moments of doubt. There will be days when you question whether you made a mistake. You will miss the comfort of clarity, even if it came from illusion. But remember, you did not come this far to abandon yourself again. You did not awaken just to fall back asleep in the comfort of conformity. You are learning how to live without false incentives. You are discovering how to act from inspiration rather than obligation. And that means you won't always be productive in the way the world defines it. You might rest more. You might pause longer. You might walk away from things that once gave you status, applause, and identity. But what you are gaining in return is something irreplaceable: integrity. Your new goals will emerge, but they will not feel like goals. They will feel like callings. They will not be driven by fear of failure or desire for validation. They will come from a deep sense of resonance, a knowing that this is what you're meant to do, not because of how it looks, but because of how it feels. And that is the kind of purpose that does not waver. So allow the space, allow the uncertainty, allow the collapse of what no longer fits. This is not the end of your ambition. It is its evolution. You are not here to impress. You are here to embody, and that kind of life can't be built overnight. It requires the courage to begin again, not from pressure, but from presence. Let go of the map. Trust the terrain. Your soul knows the way. After the awakening, when everything familiar has dissolved and your old motivations have fallen silent, you might begin to notice something subtle happening beneath the surface. It isn't dramatic or loud. It doesn't come with clarity or confidence, but it's there, a quiet awareness that you no longer wish to go back, even if you could. Despite the confusion, the emptiness, the absence of drive, there is a deeper truth beginning to emerge. You are not who you were, and you don't want to be. In the beginning, this might frighten you. The comfort of the known world, even when it was misaligned, had structure. You could predict its rewards and its failures. You could measure your progress by numbers, achievements, validations. Now, that structure has collapsed, and with it, the measuring sticks have disappeared. You are floating in a space between identities, with no titles to cling to, no routines to anchor you, and no outer momentum pushing you forward. And yet, there's an inner calm beginning to take shape. It is here, in this formless space, that something extraordinary begins to happen. Slowly, you begin to turn inward, not out of escape, but out of necessity. There is no more chasing, no more striving to prove anything. So you begin to ask different questions. Not what should I do, but who am I becoming? Not how do I get back on track, but what does alignment feel like now? And when you sit long enough in those questions, something sacred begins to whisper back. You start to sense that maybe this lack of motivation is not the problem, but the portal. Maybe what you called motivation before was actually noise. And maybe now, without that noise, you're being asked to hear your own truth for the very first time. This is when the inner compass begins to awaken. At first, it's barely noticeable, just a subtle pull toward what feels peaceful, or a slight aversion to what drains your energy. You're not chasing outcomes anymore. You're listening for resonance. You're paying attention to your body, your energy, your breath. You're noticing when your actions feel heavy and when they feel light. These are the signals of your true direction, not found in external ambition, but in internal coherence. What you're discovering now is that motivation, in the spiritual sense, is not about momentum. It's about harmony. It's not about grinding through resistance. It's about moving with what feels alive. And this requires a different kind of courage. Not the courage to push harder, but the courage to be still. To feel fully, to act only when it comes from clarity, not from fear. At times, this will feel counterintuitive. You'll question whether you're wasting time, whether you're doing enough. But deeper than that doubt is a subtle knowing that something inside you is reorienting. You're no longer forcing your way forward. You're being guided, sometimes slowly, sometimes silently, but always precisely. And even when you can't see where you're going, you're beginning to trust the part of you that does. This is a return to something primal, a reconnection with the part of you that has always known what is true, even when you ignored it. The intuition that was silenced by conditioning, the instincts that were buried under rules and expectations. You are no longer outsourcing your direction. You are reclaiming your inner authority. And as this happens, the world around you begins to shift. Not because it changes, but because you are now looking at it through different eyes. You begin to see that life doesn't require your control. It requires your cooperation. The answers don't come through effort. They come through alignment, and your path doesn't unfold through willpower, but through surrender. This is not the end of your motivation. It's the purification of it. What's arising now is no longer rooted in survival, but in soul. It moves at a slower pace, with greater depth. It doesn't demand performance. It invites presence. And that is how you begin to live in harmony with your true self. No longer pulled by fear, no longer pushed by expectation, but moved from within by something ancient and intimate and wise. This is your return, not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more videos just like this. Thank you.